I wish it had been better. I saw 3,000 Years of Longing today. I had watched the trailer for it a while back. I've got the reaction on my channel somewhere. And I remember not quite being sure what I was watching. It just seemed like it was something that's going to be just definitely out there and different. And it certainly was. There were a lot of things I liked about this film. So I'm going to talk about that sort of stuff first, or the things that I noticed or noted as I'm watching it got my little note taker on my cell phone. So basically, this movie is based on a short story called The Djinn in the Nightingale's Eye. I believe it was a short story that was in a collection of other stories. I don't know the similarities, the differences. You know how they adapt things and change it around from the written word to movie format. It's directed by George Miller, and certainly he's not an untalented director, I guess. I mean, I know he directed Fury Road, which I was not crazy about. Technically, the film was okay. So you know that this film was in decent hands as far as the technical stuff, with the director. And so I started to pay attention to different things that I noticed or liked about it. And one of the things I noticed right away, and it's not something that happens throughout the entire film, or if it is, I had just kind of lost track of it by then. But in the beginning, I noticed there were a lot of shots, symmetrical type of, or centered sort of shots. There's a shot of an airplane flying in the air, and then when it's landing, that plane is completely center in the screen. And generally, I've talked about this before, but generally the human eye doesn't like things to be centered. It likes things to be off to the left or to the right, the rule of thirds and all that. But in this particular case, shots like that were appealing. Well, to me, they were appealing. I liked the symmetry, the simplicity of those shots. There were also the shots of like a panning out and seeing an audience, and that was completely centered. The audience wasn't off to one side or whatever. It was completely centered. So stuff like that. I liked things like that. And I noticed it because it's not the type of framed shot, or it's not the type of view that we're typically given in photos and in film. And so I noticed it because of that. Another thing I noticed is this time frame in which this story takes place. It's pandemic era because people are wearing masks, things like that. That's not necessarily a pro. It's just something I noticed. Oh, okay, this is taking place 2000 and after, at least. Something else I noticed in the various shots of the movie was the comic book or graphic novel feel this had. And I remembered wondering, was this based off of a graphic novel? Then I found out at the end, it's because it says in the credits that it was based on a short story. So not a graphic novel, but it's got a graphic novel feel, just in the way certain shots are done, and the coloring. The color palette is very rich. It has that just, I don't know, it's different. The premise of the story is this. Oh my gosh, I don't even remember this character's name, played by Tilda Swinton. And she goes to Turkey, I believe it is. And she has these strange encounters with people that they have like, they're kind of blurred around the edges or whatever. And they say or do really strange things around her. And so then she also finds this little bottle in this shop, and she releases the genie in her hotel room. You see that happen in the trailer. So the bulk of the story with the two main characters, the genie and this her character, Tilda's character, takes place in her hotel room as they're talking. And during the course of this conversation, he's telling her his story. So a lot of this takes place in flashback, but mostly with him, his story. He talks about the 3 times that he'd been imprisoned in the bottle, or the events that led up to each imprisonment. And so it kind of had that, I don't know, sort of Arabian Nights slash anthology type of, an anthology storytelling type of feel to it. And these stories that he's telling, you feel like it's leading up to something, some sort of big grand reveal or big moment or whatever that's going to happen. And so that's kind of what keeps your attention. You're just, okay, what happens here? And something else I liked about the way he was telling his story was the different events that happened that led to the next thing happening, that led to this happening, that then led to him being released from the bottle or whatever. That was interesting, the little funny quirks of fate or whatever, chance happenings or whatever you want to call it, that lead to certain events taking place. And also when as they're having these or as he's telling his story, and then they cut back to them in modern day in the hotel room, they're having like a lot of this movie is very dialogue heavy. It reminds me a bit of a play because these two characters are in this room and they're having these discussions. The discussions are philosophical in nature, sort of intellectual bantering with each other because he wants her to give him these 3 wishes because that is the whole point of his existence. If he's not able to fulfill wishes that he owes to somebody, this is my understanding. If he's not able to fulfill these wishes, then his whole reason for existing is gone. He's useless basically, or something like that. And he goes into the lore of that, the all of that about the genies and everything, the jinn. So you would think that would be potentially boring, but it wasn't because the chemistry between Tilda and Idris was pretty good. Like they played off of each other really well. They're both really good actors. Now Tilda Swinton, she's not a favorite of mine, but she's not a bad actor. She just is not compelling to me. I didn't mind her in this movie though at all. Like her performance was fine. Idris, of course, was Idris. He really never fails to disappoint. If he disappoints in a movie or whatever, it's generally because the material he has to work with is the problem, not him. And I like the accent he had in here. I don't know what it was supposed to be. I don't know what type. If he was supposed to be like he spoke in English. Oh, sorry. Hold on a minute. What the heck was I saying? Oh, I was saying he spoke English with well, he doesn't start off speaking English, but his English, the way he speaks it, the dialect, obviously it's not his normal UK accent. It's I don't know, maybe like a Middle Eastern sort of dialect that he's got going on in here, and I liked it. It was very appealing. The way he talked was interesting. Since I pay attention to voices and dialects and the way people enunciate words or things like that, because that's what I work in with the audiobook production, I really hone in on things like that. And I really, really liked the way he was talking in here. Kind of like how I liked the way Leonardo DiCaprio was talking in Blood Diamond. I mean, that just fascinated me the entire movie. So there's that. There were some moments. I'm going to start to slide into con territory now. There were some moments in here, it didn't happen often, maybe twice, where the camera work made me almost nauseated. And I think part of it was because some of the camera work, just the way it moved, I'm very prone to motion sickness. So that bothered me. And then there were also when the camera's panning through a room or whatever, and these people would have these fuzzy, like, outlines, or they'd be blurry, or the camera would kind of feel like it's shaking to reflect that blurriness of their features. Oh, that really bothered me quite a bit, actually. And so I was glad when those moments passed. But that's not that's just something I noticed. So if you have a tendency to be sensitive to things like that, it might bother you. But it's not throughout the entire thing. It was just a couple times, but enough that I noticed, because I noticed things like that. So in the con, I wondered when these things happen to her. She's appearing in Turkey, and some strange person comes to her in the airport, and then she sees a strange person in the audience when she's given a speech. And right away I was wondering, well, why? What is it about her that these things? Why is it that these things are happening? What is it about her? What's drawing these things? So you think maybe there's something, bigger going on. And ultimately, it really didn't feel that way. By the time the movie wrapped up, it didn't feel like I had an answer to that question, especially because there was a hint of something more, some other sort of connection. Chibi. Some other sort of connection between her character and the Jinn's character in his past, a couple centuries removed from her. There was something that was kind of hinted at, and I thought it was going to lead to something more. I thought it was going to lead to some sort of explanation as to why these things were happening to her. That went nowhere at all. So that was a little bit frustrating, and I don't know if maybe there were some things edited out of this movie, and maybe it really was going to go there where I suspected it might, but it didn't end up in this cut, and that was sort of my first kind of like, that doesn't answer the why question, because you kind of want to know the why in order for this entire thing to make sense, but whatever. Then when it came time, so this movie was okay. Like, I wasn't super hyped to see it, but I went into it with an open mind, and I did, for the most part, enjoy the first half or first 2/3 of the film. Where this movie falls apart for me is the last third. And that happened, I know the moment it happened. The moment it happened was when it came time. Yes, this is a bit spoilery, but I'm not going to get into specific spoilers. I'm just sort of general overall stuff. The moment it happened was when she made her first wish. When she did that, it felt like, okay, whoa. This is turning, like, this shift in her happened too quickly. There wasn't sufficient lead up with this particular thing. And so it felt like it came out of the blue. And it was like, whoa, what? That was not what I was expecting her to ask for. And so when it happened, and then the rest of the story progressed from that point, it just, in the end, it felt so anticlimactic. And then it was over, and I came away from it fundamentally with a sense of disappointment, that it felt like it really didn't know what to do with itself, and it didn't know where to go once this shift happened. And that really, in my opinion, affected the entire film, because it felt like there was promise to it. It felt like there was this payoff that was going to happen, and the payoff didn't happen. The promise fell through. It just petered out. And so fundamentally, that makes me want to give this, I don't know. I don't even know if I feel like I want to give it 3 stars because of how that part of the story was handled. But at the same time, it feels a little unfair to rate it lower than 3 stars because of everything that led up to it that was interesting and captivating, and you're following along with the story, and you're watching the dialogue and the dynamic between Tilda and Idris and liking all of that. It's just unfortunate that the way it ended wasn't satisfying, and it reminds me a bit of, it doesn't make me as mad as Game of Thrones, but it reminds me of how Game of Thrones had all this awesome character development and build up and plot detail, and then at the end it just went completely down the toilet. It was so terrible, and it was such a wasted opportunity and hugely bungled. And this reminds me of that, except not quite as intensely disappointing. So it's like Game of Thrones light. Not Game of Thrones as in, all the people dying and all these terrible, but like with regard to how it ended. So those are my thoughts on 3,000 Years of Longing. Curious to know what you guys think if you ever watch it. I don't think this movie's going to be a big, huge deal. It's interesting that Idris, this is the second movie of his that has come out in a week. Last week I went to go see The Beast, which I enjoyed a lot more than this film in the end. I mean, one thing that this film did have going for it is that you didn't quite know where it was going to go. But throughout the journey, you were, or I felt pretty confident that we were going to get a payoff, that we were going to get more answers and things were going to make, perfect sense to us, and just going to be wrapped up very, in a very nice way. And I'm not saying that I didn't like that things ended in a way that, I'm not saying, Chibi, I'm not saying that I was disappointed that things didn't end the way I had hoped to, or whatever, or like I wanted this perfect ending, or it's not like that. She's distracting me so much with her scratching of the chair. I've totally lost my train of thought. Oh, okay. So yeah, The Beast, pretty predictable type of situation, right? And safe as far as that goes. You pretty much know what you're in for when you go to watch a movie like that. This is completely different. My dislike for how this film went isn't because it's different, and it isn't because it's unpredictable as far as the way things happen, or you just didn't know what was going to happen next or whatever. It's just because it felt like they didn't follow through with the ending, and that's the main problem. So unfortunately, I mean, I don't regret that I watched it. It's not a Moonfall, it's not a Green Knight, it's not anything like that, but I just think it could have been so much better in the end. So this is one of those unfortunate times where a story gets started off really well and then it just doesn't follow through, doesn't live up to the potential that the first 2/3 of the film had. So, okay, well, I think that's it for 3,000 Years of Longing, and I don't have anything else to say. Later, guys.